I want to focus on sins against indigenous populations because this is this lie, again, that liberalism and Protestantism have spread, that he's obviously given into here, that the Catholic Church somehow is responsible for oppression of indigenous populations, when in fact the church sent missionaries that did really nothing but raise these populations up. I mean, in many cases, they had no written language. The church wrote down and created a written language for them, brought them education, brought them technological advance, and most importantly, brought them the true faith. But somehow that's a sin
Well,
against
those are all
indigenous.
sins against indigenous people.
Right,
Don't you know that?
Oh,
The indigenous people should have been left to live in their miserable hovels in the middle of dense jungles or rainforests and left there to rot away in the midst of disease, unspeakable poverty, the degradation of women by the men in the tribe, and a brutal and nasty and short existence, to use the Hobbesian phrase. Well, we should leave them that way because to attempt to elevate them is a sin against them. And of course, you can't actually clear the forest and build houses for these people. They're not supposed to be living in houses. They need to be living in huts. This is actually, isn't it ironic? This is a form of cultural imperialism. He's always denouncing cultural imperialism, but this is the ultimate form of cultural imperialism. The condescending Western liberal who thinks that the savage in the rainforest or the jungle should remain just as he is. They're there, happy savage.
Right.
It's the Rousseauian image of the happy savage living in his brutish life without the burden of Christian moral precepts, patting them on the head and saying that's the way they should be left. Those are the sins against the indigenous populations. So we sin by living our lives in a normal way in Western societies with the so-called conveniences of in air conditioning and running water and heat. And we sin against indigenous populations by trying to give them these things. Oh, man, the next one, we have to get to that. The sin against migrants.
I mean, shouldn't there be the sins committed by migrants?
No, they don't commit sin. It's a sin to say that migrants commit sin. That's one of the sins against migrants, accusing them of committing crimes. When they stab people to death in public places and you point that out, well, that's a sin against those migrants. They're not allowed to point out that they're illegal migrants. There's no such thing as illegal immigration, according to Francis, unless, of course, you live in the Vatican, which has the strictest immigration policy in the entire world. Try stepping across the borderline of the Vatican city-state without permission and see what happens to you.
Well, classic liberalism. Do as I say, don't as I do, not as I do.
Not to mention the 100-foot wall around the entire enclave.
Right, but walls are bad. They're
walls don't work. No, walls don't work. Neither does the front door to your house. Yeah. You think the front door to your house is going to protect you? They can just break that down. Okay, so we shouldn't have any front doors to our houses. Right. Shouldn't have any fences on our borders. Unless you're a liberal, then you have, a double security lock and a bodyguard.
Right.
In your multi-million-dollar mansion.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to save the pièce de résistance for a minute, but this one's really bizarre to me. Sins against poverty. How do you sin against poverty? By getting rich? Like, I don't know. What's a sin against poverty?
In the twisted scriptural exegesis of Francis, poverty per se is a virtue. Just being poor makes you virtuous. Not for Francis is the idea that among the poor there is in many places rampant immorality, a total breakdown of the family, fatherless homes, crime out of control, drug addiction. In fact, he would incoherently blame poverty for all these evils, and yet he talks about sins against poverty. Well, the whole idea is to lift people out of poverty and give them incentives, not the incentive of the United States welfare system, but the incentive to have an intact family, as is being done in some of the still residually Catholic European nations like Hungary, where there are tremendous tax incentives for having children and maintaining an intact family. But he thinks poverty is a virtue. That's not what the gospel actually says. It's, blessed are the poor in spirit. What the gospel says. Yes. Not blessed are those who fall below the economic indicators for a family of four.
So, I mean, on that logic, wouldn't it be a sin against poverty to actually give money to somebody who's poor? Because, I mean, they're better off poor.
Well, I mean, Francis is certainly not living in poverty. He lives in a 5-star hotel. He has all the luxuries a man could want. He travels around in private chartered jets everywhere, spewing carbon into the atmosphere, although he hasn't been traveling much lately. This is, the typical liberal hypocrisy that we see in civil society, and now we see it with the currently reigning Pope, denouncing the sins of everyone, the sins that he himself commits, the way of life that he denounces that he himself is living.
Yeah. All right, here's the one. This one, I couldn't believe this one. Sin of using doctrine as stones to be hurled. Wonder who he's talking about there.
Maybe he's talking about, I don't know. I seem to remember that God inscribed certain things on stone tablets.
Did he?
Remind me,
No, that must
what
not
was
be
that
true.
again? Oh, yeah, it was the 10 Commandments. God saw fit to inscribe the 10 Commandments on stone, and Moses brought them down from the mountain. So he goes beyond that, of course. It isn't just moral precepts. Any and all Catholic doctrine become for him stones that are being hurled at people. What does he mean by hurling doctrine? He means teaching it. He means defending it. So if we can't teach it or defend it without being accused of hurling doctrinal stones, what is left of Catholic doctrine? Well, exactly what he wants to be left. Nothing.
No.
And this is exactly what Pius X said in Notre Charge Apostolique. While you ask my next question, I'll pull that up so the readers can recall his prediction. Notre Charge Apostolique was his papal encyclical denouncing the movement of interreligious brotherhood that would supposedly bring peace to the world by uniting all people on commonalities of truth. So he says here that it would have, there would be a religion without doctrine or dogma. Let me get the exact quote. Yes, it will have a one world, there will be a result, will be a one world church, which shall have neither dogmas nor hierarchy, neither discipline for the mind nor curb for the passions, and which under the pretext of freedom and human dignity would bring back to the world the reign of legalized cunning and force and the oppression of the weak and of all those who toil and suffer, end quote. That's the globalist New World Order that this Pope is the mascot of. And he's promoting it by reducing Catholicism to an NGO, basically that's what it is, a non-governmental organization, promoting reduction of CO2 emissions and condemning sins against nature, and promoting this idea of interreligious brotherhood, which means there's no more doctrine, no more dogma. There's just a one-world religion that results in the oppression of everybody. That's what we're talking about.